the whole situation in Maui, and I want to talk about that a little bit here, especially in relationship to what happened in Florida. But let's see if we can't do something that is productive for us as a group. And I'm going to leave this thing. I'm not going to mute everybody. Use the space bar or alternate A to speak up. If you want me to call on you, just raise your hand. It's down at the bottom of the screen. But I want to start with the NPT, whatever you call it. It's coming on October 4th. I think that it's a joke. Okay? I think every SECC should know already if 100% of their stations are getting the monthly tests and make arrangements. Many of you don't know that the FEMA weekly test was supposed to be a one-time event. And Richard Redmond and I jumped them. That's why you get one every week. They were going to do it once and stop. Again, they don't have a clue as to how broadcasters operate. Now, we got the NPT. Okay, here we go. Form 1. Anybody have a question about Form 1? What it is, why you have to file it by September 15th?
I'd like to know why we have to do it again when nothing changes.
Well, you don't actually have to do it again if nothing has changed. What they're basically saying is if there has been a change in the EAS contact from January till now, you need to update the Form 1. That's basically what it is. And I can almost understand that.
That's reasonable.
I think LMS, I think updating contacts for broadcasters is important. And one of the questions I have out to the FCC that hasn't quite gotten an answer yet. You are open, if you're on the air, you're open for inspection. And with no main studio, if an inspector drives up to your building and calls the number that's listed in the LMS and it goes to an answering machine, is this meeting the rule that you're open for inspection? I mean, this is aside from EAS, and we can come back to that. But Form 1 is designed to make sure they know who to contact if there's a problem. I'm unaware of them actually having contacted anybody over the past 10 years, but it's there. Form 2 is the form for the day of the test. This year, our hammering finally got a whole extra 24 hours to use it. So although the test is on October 4th at 2:20 Eastern Time, 1:20 Central Time, 12:20 Mountain, 11:20 Western Pacific, you have until the following day, midnight, to get your report in. I still think that's awfully tight for a contractor who's contracting 20 stations, or somebody who's in charge of 20 odd stations, let's say. But it's at least more than 8 hours. Form 3, you got what, a month and a half? And that's where they want you to describe the test, how it sounded to you, did you relay it, et cetera, et cetera. And
Can someone other do the reporting than the engineer?
Well, yeah, of course. Whoever has the access to the ETRS, if you have the login and the password, could be the PD, could be the GM, could be the office manager. It does not have to be the engineer. Ed, I know you're there. Adam, I see that you came along. Comment on this at this point?
No, not particularly. Not on the the scheduling of the ETRS and the online stuff. That's the logic of that is opaque to me.
Okay, I just find every year that when I talk to them, oh, we have plenty of server capacity, we won't have any problems, everybody can file their reports. And I keep saying, number one, no, you don't have enough server capacity. And number two, if you have that many stations, it's not going to be 5 minutes. And you have to give people time to do, because the report doesn't, well, Ed, how long does the report take? 18 months?
Take to file?
Oh, for them to report back to us.
Oh, I mean, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy, but it can take up to 18 months for them to get
Yeah.
a public report out. It first goes up to FEMA, and FEMA has it for several months prior to that. And then eventually get it. But one thing I had proposed, and it didn't go anywhere for a number of reasons, but this reporting, we have reporting services on board the DASDEC. Log collection, we have Halo and the collector, virtualized systems that can aggregate logs and do a printout. One of our large cable customers, for example, they have 300 some odd or 400 some odd cable device DASDECs across their cable plant. They grab all the log information, the reporting information from their entire system, and Halo collects it and it gives them the regulatory folks a nice printout of everything you need for some of the forms. One comment, related comments is that should be easy enough to electronically file. I mean, whether we could develop an online filing system if the FCC would just standardize these things and not change its questions from year to year. Wouldn't it be neat to just have the device automatically file? This is you put your contact information in the AES device. It automatically updates with the FCC, syncs with the FCC server, pops out that you got the test and done. But the FCC wants not just quantitative data, but qualitative information. Why did it fail? How badly did it fail? Any other observations? I mean, this is not once you're down the air chain from the EAS device, any number of things can happen. So, I guess what I'm blathering on about is that in 2023, going into 2024, we should be able to automate most of this. You know who you are. That can be plugged into a system like Halo or the DASDEC. That could file automatically the FCC. And as long as the test goes through, no problems. If there is a problem, then go to manual filing. But all the rest of this nonsense, quite on, and I don't need to be, don't need to look down on the FCC, but the paperwork for these tests is ridiculous. An NPT should be quite, honestly, an NPT should be as common as a required monthly test. In fact, the FCC should be running, or FEMA should be running these a lot more than once a year with a lot more hullabaloo. In fact, they should even be doing them unannounced. What's the best way to test the hardness of the system? Do it unannounced. Why don't they do it unannounced? Why don't they do it more often? Because of this paperwork burden. Can we solve the paperwork burden? I just said, yeah, we could if we work together on it.
Is this something you think that the broadcasters should request?
I think that would be ample material for NAB and CTA, throwing apps, the Public TV Association, others to say to the FCC, let's create a standardized reporting process.
No, I mean, should we file a petition requesting an unannounced test?
No, I think that would cause an enormous amount of heartburn of people, and that's feedback. We need the rest of the guys' feedback here on the call. That's the way it should be done. But to do unannounced tests, we need to clean up the front end a lot first. And by cleaning up the front, I mean the paperwork burden. Automate it. That way you can run unannounced tests to your heart's content, and the EAS box does what the EAS box could do and report back. As long as it's not going to be like automated finding of you guys, look for the Trojan horse here. And I'm leaning forward on this because we've already got capabilities to do these types of things on an individual device basis. or on a system-wide basis if people collect with Halo. I can't speak to other manufacturers, but if the reporting is standardized, any changes are noted months and months in advance, then there's a software change. This type of compliance reporting should be automated and automatic.
Now
Which
you've been on the committees, and so I'll ask you this question. It has been suggested more than once that the EAS boxes report back to the FEMA that they received the test and report that they broadcast it.
That's not FEMA's responsibility.
No, it's not their responsibility, but it would be one easy collection point for data.
It would be. There are a number of issues, including privacy, data collection requirements. You're reporting. Don't think of it as FEMA. Think about the Department of Homeland Security. You're sending data back to Homeland Security, and they've got all sorts of rules governing that. That's one objection. I think it'd be really cool to do it, as long as they have the regulatory or the statutory ability to do it, or logistical ability. The other consideration is filing it directly back to the FCC. The FCC does a test report. It's their test report.
Yes,
So,
and their servers would be the ones that would be flooded and would not receive the reports.
Do they think that somebody has to hear it? Because what if your EAS unit, the relay went out and didn't actually throw the relay and put it on the air?
well, that's why I'm saying that if it went out and you can attest that it went out, then that's just a checkbox. Maybe that's your manual checkbox after the test. If it didn't go out, then unfortunately the engineer needs to weigh in and figure out why. Now, I was talking to, again, Mr. Major Cable Company the other day, and I was floored when he noted that his compliance cost in the last national periodic test in the DEN dollars was $1.5 million. It cost him $1.5 million in labors and fees to generate their response to the FCC. Why? Well, this cable plant is complicated, but they had failures. They had garbage audio coming in. It wasn't them. The LP1 and what have you fed garbage audio. The cable system, it was unintelligible. So they had to run down and report very, very diligently and in detail why it failed. I'm suggesting that if all goes well, it's the device should render a report, and your only involvement should be certifying, hey, it went off fine out of our plant, the air chain worked fine. If it doesn't go fine, then you need to look into why it didn't go fine and keep notes on it. But the FCC's, the reporting requirement needs to be better defined. I mean, how much work are you going to put into defining what happened and why?
Well, but of course, now you get to what the purpose. The FCC looks at EAS as one thing and one thing only: national. That's all they care about. It used to be, in the olden days, that every market, every area, some station listened to every other. In other words, stations were assigned to listen to other stations, so that you knew if somebody's EAS box went bad or it was out for service or whatever. But now all they care about, and it was made very, very clear in this SECC filings, and if you are on an SECC, I sure wish you would speak up. They only care about that you can receive the LP1, the LP2, or your wavered monitoring assignment, so that the national EAS, EAN, whatever they're going to call it can get through. That's all the FCC cares about. They really don't. You can use EAS for local or regional emergencies.
I think that's an overstatement again. They do care, but their statutory authority is kind of bound really solid around the EA and NPT. And the logic is, if it works for an NPT, it should work for pretty much everything else. If it works for an RMT and RWT, the system should be working. there are lots of ghosts in the machine in the national EAS, from a PEP level on down.
Okay, let's talk about that in a minute. But I first of all, I want to close the circle here with the forms, if you don't mind. Because the NPT, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, and December 12th, is it, Ed, I think?
I think so.
Everyone is required to have an update to their EAS box. Now, you guys at NASDAQ are up to date as of today, but you will need an update to allow, what is it, the number of seconds to check for the alternative audio?
Well, the FCC did two changes, which one I kind of can understand because it accommodates another vendor who has some limitations. And then the other one I just can't understand. So one change is to the polling interval, and Adam's on, he probably can explain it better. He's more of an engineer. The lead time for there's a fixed requirement for how long we need to wait and keep polling before we proceed ahead with the EAS message. But the second change, which okay. So I don't like that. It's unnecessary in our case, but I guess another vendor has some issues, so that's a kludge for them. But the other change actually eliminates a lot of flexibility. We in our alert agent, and Adam, I'm going to call on you if you're still here to explain this a little better. But our alert agent originally provided an enormous amount of flexibility in allowing the user to pick which event codes to use trigger cap polling, which not to. So just for an example, a tornado warning. Where tornado warning is a tornado warning, that's a short burst message. There is a tornado for X county. It's on the ground. There's a tornado for X county. If the EAS message comes in first and you don't want to wait 1 extra second, goes to air. So we had the option of selecting, letting you select codes that tornado alert goes to air immediately. An amber alert would wait for the cap message and pull for the cap message because you want maybe the additional context. It's less time sensitive. And a flash flood, or pick another one, a fog warning or whatever. That's just log only. So those types of detailed rules. The FCC simplified it. Don't know why they simplified it. So now all local EAS message, all civil and weather codes must be trigger cap polling. So you no longer have the flexibility to say we're probably going to get the tornado warning. We just want to air the one that comes in first, regardless. The other change, of course, which we already had in our system, was that EAN and NPT are always are exempt from trigger cap polling. So EAN and NPT don't need this trigger cap polling rule because it's always presumably broadcast first. I mean, Adam, do you want to correct me on any of that or amplify it?
No. I mean, you captured it well. I guess to summarize, we had been doing what the FCC was proposing for years, and what happened was we lost a lot of flexibility that our platform had before, to conform to the new rules. I personally disagree with the exclusion of the national events from triggered cap polling, because I believe we have all heard the effect of second or third generation audio, or audio that is being captured while it's being played out, and then that becomes the audio message. So the intent of improving the situation through triggered cap polling, to exclude the two most important events for it, I didn't agree with, and that's just my 2 cents.
And that really speaks to one of the problems that I've heard over and over again, that if there's a bad storm in an area during an alert or a test, and the AM station is the LP1, very often other stations won't receive the test or the alert because there's so much static and noise on the air. So you would think that the CAP would be a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that we had provided the flexibility for an exception.
Yeah.
In Tornado Alley, I'm just using Tornado as an example, but in Tornado Alley, where seconds count, you don't want to waste even a second polling for the cap message.
Get it out there. Let
Just
people
get it
know.
out there for that one event code. For everything else,
Yeah.
as long as you intelligibly can hear tornado warning and the county, run with it.
Oh, you're going to get me into talking about counties and FIPS, aren't you?
Oh no, I don't want to go there.
No, not right now. But you guys are up with your version 5.1 now, and 5.2 will be out before December.
5.2 will be out long before December.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen several candidate versions going back and forth in email.
We're getting there very close.
We're getting very close. But you raise a question that I think we need to clarify here, because I've gotten a lot of calls about this. The test is in October. You don't have to have these December EAS rules in place before the test. I mean, there's no imperative for you to support the new FCC rules before then. You shouldn't wait till the last minute to apply them, but this national test is not necessarily a trigger event to install the new DASDEC or Sage or whatever software. And I think this is going to lead to some funkiness in the result, because depending on the broadcast or software on the EAS device, you're going to have different text on the screen. Is that material? No, but it certainly is not going to make a homogeneous EAS story if the cable providers are providing the latest and then the broadcasters still have the old 5.1 or earlier software.
Well, sadly, I've heard reports that in some cases, one fellow who does consult LPFMs in particular, that half of his LPFMs either don't have an EAS box or have software that's 3 generations or more old. It's a problem. This is again why I asked if we got some SECC people along. The FCC wanted those state plans filed by July of 2022 deadline. We're still working on it, obviously.
So you're going to get me going talking about LPFMs now.
Yeah. Before I move on to the aspect here of upgrades, as I understand it, Sage has been promising to have their upgrade ready to go in June, July, and before the end of August. I have not heard that it's out yet, so I'm thinking that it will be sometime in September. I know Gorman Redlick has got an update, and if you have a Gorman Redlick, it's interesting. They will come in remotely and set your box up to the current standard. Now, you're going to spend $150 with Sage or with Gorman Redlick. You're going to spend a lot more with DASDEC. Now, on one hand, and here again, let me finish. Let me finish, Ed. On one hand, we'll welcome any comment that you may make about this. But the point that Ed will make to you is that this is a 4 or 5 year update for only 400 some bucks, okay? Of all the things that you budget for, and remember last week we talked about budgets and looking ahead, and it's important. You need to have everything in your shop, whether it be a dry air maker, or you figure it, your tire pressure gauge, whatever. You need to have tools that you can use today, batteries for your DVM, and your EAS box needs to be up to date. It's not DASDEC's fault that the FCC and the FEMA made all these changes. They have to spend hours and hours to program this stuff and bring it up to date. And unfortunately, the way the industry works, they resist updates. And eventually you get to a point where you have to do it. There's no other question. Now, Ed, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm not going to say that you are overcharging. And I think that it's needs to be made.
I mean, we're not the cheapest device out there, of course. Although total coastal ownership pretty darn close with our leading competitor. I'm gonna state company policy here. We do not charge for regulatory updates. We do not charge for regulatory updates. Unless, of course, the FCC does something remarkably stupid, like it did a couple of years, 5 years ago. Version 5.2 comes at no charge to anybody in the version 5 series of software. Version 5.2 comes to no charge at anyone who's in the software assurance plan. No, 5.2 comes to no charge for anybody who's recently purchased a DASDAQ. The 5.0 update included a major OS upgrade, functional updates, and cybersecurity updates. Yes, we're in that world. The prior paid event, if you will, was 2017. So right now we're running 4 years between updates. And these are not driven by regulation. These are driven by functional changes, cybersecurity changes. And trust me, you don't want to be in my shoes when it comes to these cybersecurity hackers out there. They're a nightmare. I'm just, this is not being defensive. This is explaining how we do our pricing on the software. These are major version shifts where we're investing in a tremendous amount of resources to do a platform upgrade and add functionality, not to capitalize on an FCC action.
All right.
I really dislike when certain other vendors maybe cashing in. The FCC's made a minor change. To us, the changes the FCC made are truly minor. Storing some text and blurting it out is not a major change. That took our guys, Adam, what, 2 days total effort to reprogram?
Yeah, that was super minor.
Yeah, trigger cap polling, like I say, it's great because we had to revisit something we already had. It's another 2 days of effort, but we already had it. And we didn't charge for it the first time we put it out in 2017. So somehow we get the reputation of, charging people. I mean, 4 years between updates and all this stuff we just bundle in. And we even create plans to make sure that people don't get stuck with a $400 or $500 fee. Thinking, they have an assurance plan which keeps them up to date. So a little bit of a trigger point for me, I guess, but that's.
And it should be. I certainly appreciate that aspect and the fact that as we look at this, as we look at any part of the broadcast, good grief, there are stations still running tube transmitters. Hello, we're in the atomic age somewhere. Good
Well,
grief.
you mentioned before there are the LPFM guys who are dangerously out of compliance. Not just EAS, but for purpose of this conversation, they don't have EAS devices. That's, if they're an FCC licensee, that's not acceptable. I mean, why are they skirting the rules and you guys get saddled with it? And then I just dealt with, Adam and I were dealing with another LPTV or LPFM, excuse me, I think. They bewilderingly still had their EAS device on the open internet and they got hacked. Nothing happened. They got the device was intruded upon. But I mean, what kind of stump are you living under? Being really overly blunt about it, what kind of stump are you living under if in 2023 you don't realize that sensitive equipment of any type, whether it's your home computer or your PC, should not be left on the open internet, and you need to keep your software updates. You keep your software reasonably up to date, not running version 2 or 3, which is decade old, on the and keeping your device outside your firewall with not even nothing in front of it. That's all I'll say about that. But I wish there were some SEC people, because there's a pretty large contingent of EAS participants out there that still either don't have the equipment or are not properly maintaining it, and that's going to come bite us again. Yeah, obviously, my yellow flag is up. We're coming into a national test, and already 2 cyber researchers have popped up approaching us. Our thought is that there will likely be shenanigans of some kind between now and the national test.
Good. And talking to Bill over the years and what you guys are trying to accomplish and how you're trying to accomplish it is good and important. And and yet the understanding in the field, it's like I say, sometimes a station buys a piece of gear and they figure that's it. They're never going to replace it or upgrade it. It's going to run forever. It doesn't work that way. The programming has forced you guys to go to a different motherboard in the box, and that requires programming. That requires a whole restart.
Well, I mean, cable industry and the government themselves had advised us to move to certain, 64-bit encryption. That's the standard. So you can't use 32-bit boards anymore with 64-bit hardware. It's just the reality of the world.
Now, we don't have anyone here from Sage or from Gorman Redlick that I'm aware of with us at the moment. But can you address anywhere there for folks to understand what's going on with their boxes?
No, I can't speak to their pricing policy or their upgrade policy.
Okay. I will note that 20 odd years ago, I was working in a cluster, and we had, I think we had 3 Sage upgrades in a matter of months. It was, turn around, redo. And each one of them had to be separate because we had a separate box for each station. But let's go back again toward this idea of the equipment itself needing to be upgraded and cared for. Now, if I remember correctly, there are at the moment what the 4 dot something or other out there, and the 5 dot something. That about right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're running version 4.1.
Yeah,
Or-
so I can speak to this. So any person running having a DASDEC 2 running version 4 dot anything, 1, you're perfectly fine with the national test, but 2, you can update to directly to version 5 dot. In this case, you would update to version 5.1, and then we will provide you an update to 5.2. The reason for that is the jump from version 4 to version 5 is a major leap. It is on the back end, we're updating the base OS, and then the next jump to 5.2 does not only a regulatory upgrade, but also updates the GUI, the user interface. Anyone running, now this would be our last of our DASDEC 2 line, what we call the /4s and /5s. They shipped with version 4.7, which was kind of a hybrid, had the updated base OS, but was still running the older user interface. They can go directly to 5.1 and then 5.2. Or actually, I should say they could go directly to 5.2. Anybody that has purchased within the last year and a half at this point has at least version 4.7, probably version 5 dot something, and they, like I said, can go right to our latest release.
So we're showing the screen that shows the version numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on a 5 dot system, it's going to be right here under setup, right here in the middle. And if you're on the older boxes, it's going to be under what? Alert events. It's going to be over here.
Yeah, and you can also, well, nope, never mind. I was going to say something that's no longer true. So, yep, you are spot on, Barry.
Okay.
But for those of you, reiterate the point, the top frame, which is mostly white, nice and clean, that's the latest interface. And the multicolored affair below, that's our old interface. So you're not going to see both when you're online. That's
Yeah.
the new look.
Yeah, the top half here was DASDEC 3. This is the DASDEC 2. So there you go. I don't have a Sage thing here in front of me or the ability. Does anybody here that's online have access to your rack? Can you show us a Sage to show us the version number? Now, I know you can see it in your software.
I can look here real quick.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. This is version. Why am I not seeing the version? Oh, 5/95. And it's REF6 P2. That's the latest one.
Now, can you see that on the front screen of the box, or do you see that only on your software?
I'm seeing that on my software.
Okay, can you bring it up on the front panel of your box?
I probably can. I have to walk over to the box. It's across the room.
I'm into one of my boxes and I've got Rev 6 P4 loaded, so P2 may not be the most recent. I don't know what the difference is.
Oh, I don't know. I was just on Sage's site this last week to look up some other information, and of course was curious about whether they had come up with this new firmware update yet. And I still hadn't seen anything.
Chris Hill sends a note here in the text that the 6/12/23 shows Rev 6 P4. Or at least that's when his system rebooted.
Well, let me go look at my box.
I was just going from the standpoint of, is there an easy way to determine, short of bringing this, in other words, you know, if you could ask any staffer to go take a look. And I already know that with DASDEC, that's not possible. You have to log in as a security thing. The Jerry's got a P4 as well. So when Mark comes back to us, I'm pretty sure there is a cadence with those buttons that you can get to the rev number on the front panel of the Sage, but it's a little complicated. It's not something that I would have thought should be right on the front, just like the fact that the internet is connected or the FEMA feed is connected. I know the Sage will email you if that's interrupted, whereas I don't think the DASDEC will.
Hey, Barry,
Yes, sir.
I'm logged into my Sage. It's, let's see, CR-Rev6 Papa 4.
Okay. On the screen?
Yeah, I'm remote. I'm not at the studio.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is via a web interface. I'm not sure you can bring it up on the front panel. If it is, it's really obscure. I do very little by that front panel because it's 2 lines of text, 4 buttons, and I'd just rather use a web browser.
Jerry suggested it might show during the boot.
It might, but I normally don't want to reboot it. And I just had mine sent in because it kept, you know, it wouldn't boot up fully. They told me it was the power switch.
Okay.
I have some further information on this P4 situation. My Sage is giving me a history of the 3 most recent previous updates. And apparently, when I did the update to Rev 6 on July 4th of 2021, it had previously been running Rev 5, comma, space P4. So apparently the P4 doesn't have anything to do with the Rev. It was a patch.
I went from, let's see, it installed the P4 update. And before that, it was P2. So P4 was some kind of patch. In both cases, it was OCR5, 95.0 CR5. So the P2 went from P to P4 on my case.
So all things considered, the update has to come sometime within the next month or so, but it does not affect the reception of the test on October 4th. And that's the key thing. If you can't receive that test on October 4th, you're way behind and
Oh, yeah.
need to do something post-toasty.
Well, I think the last major update they did was for a license deal for the iPods, especially.
Well, that was an issue with the FEMA, and
Right.
I've had some conversations with them because this isn't the first time they've done that their certificate has gone out of date and broadcasters were sort of left
Hanging. Yeah.
Any other questions that anyone has about their current EAS box or updating or the cost factor? I really appreciate Ed and Adam illuminating there. And what can I say? We get back to this whole thing about budgets. We get back to management's attitude, which brings me to the next part of this, unless someone has something they want to bring up right now, and that is where EAS is. In Maui, from everything we've learned so far, they got hit by almost the perfect storm of problems. The EM, the emergency manager there, was a political family appointee, something like that, who had no previous experience. He made the choice of not setting the siren off because he figured people would run to the hill, which is where the fire was. But if you have a fire that's racing through an area at a mile a minute, you don't have much time for much of anything. And of course, what do we know about cell service and the internet? Wasn't there. What did the radio stations get from the emergency management? Not very much. The information they got was from listeners. The television station that was, you could watch it if you had cable and you had power. The woman there, the weathercaster, she apparently echoed the emergency manager. If you want more information about this problem, go to our website or social media, which does no one any good during an emergency. I've said this a few times during our broadcasts, and I'm probably going to say it again. We have a culture problem. Broadcasters are forced to do EAS. Emergency managers are asked to cooperate. They don't trust broadcasters. As Richard Redmond mentioned last week, a lot of this depends on the relationship that is forged between broadcasters and emergency management. I would venture to say that vast majority of folks that are with us today on Zoom or on YouTube are on the technical side or the IT side. But where is this cooperation driven? Isn't it from programming? Isn't it from management? Is there a way to get management more involved? Sure, you could be part of the LECC or the SECC, and you can reach out. But is there really going to be something going on where, well, I think I said it earlier, 24/7. What happens if there's an emergency at 10 o'clock at night? And the station number that's there in LMS or on Form 1 is dialed. What happens? We can get audio on the air. You can VPN into almost any automation system or any other system with enough preparation. But can an emergency manager reach someone? If you remember the, was it North Dakota, South Dakota, Fargo? They had a train derailment and chemical spill, was it? Or Sheriff's Department said they couldn't contact the radio stations. They had an EAS box, they didn't use it. They said they couldn't contact the radio station.
Wasn't this in Minot?
Minot? Yeah. You got it. And yet the people there at the radio stations were broadcasting about the situation and were looking for information, but couldn't get the emergency manager's phone to answer. Almost like a comedy, like a farce.
That's just how they are. I know back in New Mexico, if you called after hours, you got a automatic attendant, and it gave you, buttons to push to get to the program director, or if you knew their extension, dial it now, and you'd get a voicemail. And that was that. You could call a hotline, but there was nobody there, in the middle of the night. The automation was running and it doesn't answer phones.
Yeah, last week, Rich, you had repeated the story about the tornado in Western Massachusetts.
Yeah, totally useless.
So is it a radio problem? Thank you, Ed. Thanks for being here. Is it a radio problem? Is it an EAS problem? Is it a functional problem? Is it a problem that's unsolvable?
It's a money problem.
Well, I would disagree with all of the above. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think the biggest problem is that nobody has talked to the general public and said, what does the general public want in an EAS system? Okay, do you want to know about every amber that has ever occurred or every silver alert? And as I mentioned to Barry a couple of days ago when we were talking about this, you drive under a freeway sign that says silver alert for some car, and in 500 feet, you can't remember the license plate or what the car even looks like. So what value is this to the general public? Yes, in the Midwest, we need to know about tornadoes. We need to know about fires, but, in Lahaina, that was a really painful situation in that you have one way in and one way out. And if you've got everybody coming out, you're not going to be able to get any emergency vehicles in to fight the fire. So what do you do?
By the way, Richard Rudman pointed out that the California Highway Patrol when they started putting these signs up, they kept getting phone calls from women who said, "My name's Amber, what do you want?"
Yeah.
For an Amber Alert. Now, the flip side of Lahaina that Brian just mentioned is Florida. Now, They knew this hurricane was coming for a week. It was, see, the EAS is, sort of like doorbell, getting people's attention. You don't have the same, do you want a storm warning? Do you want a flood warning off EAS for a hurricane? Does that make any sense whatsoever?
They want updates on Mar-a-Lago secret documents and how DeSantis is doing in running for president.
Yes.
this is an area, I think, where radio can and should be a major community asset. Requires 24/7 people, first of all. During Katrina, I know that there were people from the radio station WWL. They holed up in the studio there for days to broadcast. They came close to running out of fuel because some county mountie tried to stop the diesel truck from getting to the transmitter. I thought that was interesting that the governor of Florida issued a statement to make sure that fuel trucks were to be non-molested as they went through. But you get the radio station, they don't have a generator. Jeff Adams, I think you're still with us. How many of your stations went off the air because of no power?
We stayed on the whole time. This was not near as bad as Ian, thank God. And that I think that's also all up and down the coast too, because of where it was. So it was really just a big rainmaker, and very little, wind, but there was the flooding. But I don't think that there was that many stations that were off. I haven't heard I haven't heard the final tally. When I do, I'll go ahead and email it to you. You can post it.
I appreciate that. I have been to Perry, Florida, oddly enough, and it's a very interesting, very flat land, very nice place in a way, but sure would want to be there during the storm. David, what do you have to say?
Well, I was thinking about this, and this might be the first real good reason to use an AI system to send out alerts. And I really think AI could have a benefit in this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that'd be a great application for AI.
What happens to listeners who aren't listening to radio or, at the same time are asleep? How do they get emergency messages?
Well, listeners don't get to sleep unless the engineers are sleeping, okay?
You're a dreamer.
And you're asleep most of the time.
I just had the most horrible dream.
Wasn't there a plan originally that that EAS was going to come through smoke detectors and everything too? Wasn't there a plan about that around maybe 15 years ago or so that never happened?
Oh, thank God that never happened.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to the privacy aspect that TVs and radios that could turn themselves on and announce that there was an alert. This was something that didn't get very far with the consumer electronics industry or the general public, if I remember correctly.
Well, what's this Amber Alert that comes on everybody's cell phones? I mean, why can't there be something similar to that on a more localized basis?
Because locally, many people would have programmed their phone not to run these alerts. Now, this gets to a whole big thing here. As these reporters wandered around the storm over this week, many people ignored evacuation notices, stayed right where they were. Well, I was there last time and I survived. I'm going to get through it this time. And how do you get information to those people?
Every storm is different.
Jerry, that's a great idea. Jerry Olson says we're using an EAS version that includes bed shakers for radio for the deaf. Now, that is a good deal. Is that in conjunction with a particular company, Jerry?
Mattress Firm?
No, but you have to drop a
You could-
quarter into the slot.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say, if you go to a
Oh.
cheap motel that has the vibrating beds, you have to put a quarter in it.
I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was it went through the HD radio. So they gave us a special HD radio that could accept these tactile alerts. But I don't know if I forget the actual company that was doing it, but it was something that came through, whoever was doing HD radio at that time.
So analog wouldn't work.
No, not for this one.
Yeah,
Okay.
but people might enjoy it.
Well, the problem is HD radios on the desktop or the bedside are few and far between. The majority of them are in cars. So unless you're sleeping in your car.
Well, you can get them though, and they're not terribly expensive. Fangen has one for about $49. It's an absolutely beautiful bedside alarm radio. It's
With
just,
HD?
how do you get people to buy them?
With HD in it?
Yes, it's HD. It's got RBDS. It's got all kinds of stuff.
I've got a Sony table radio that's HD. I moved about a year ago and it's still in the box.
I had one from Radiosophy and I had one from Boston Acoustics. I mean,
Oh, well, I've got the Sony tuner. I've got the Insignia. And I had, I think it was Boston Acoustics.
And
then-
I found that you have to go down the block to get an HD signal in my neighborhood. I can't get an HD in my house.
Yeah, I have problems with HD, particularly in my vehicle. Keeps changing modes.
well, I think the linking this and probably ATSC3 could also do it. Is this ongoing, Jerry? Is this a past experiment or one that's continuing?
As far as I can tell, it's still going on, although I haven't gotten any feedback from it. I'll have to go back and exhume some old emails and see if I can figure out what it was.
Yeah, I would think that especially with ATSC3 coming along, that this is going to be something that could proliferate very rapidly.
Yeah.
But, again, you got to have some method of getting that information to the transmitter to get out to people. And if there's nobody around, do you want to trust AI?
Well, I think it's an improvement over nobody around.
Your AI coming off your radio station in Seattle or Tacoma says, I noticed there's a tornado in Wichita, Kansas.
Well, my mother-in-law
Maybe they
lives
could
in
use the
Wichita,
same
so yes,
voice.
I would like to know about that. But yeah, I get your point, Barry. Yeah, but you have the same problem with the existing boxes that if they're not properly programmed, they're going to fire off weird warnings also. So,
Okay, Brian, you're I won't say unique among us here today, but you have experience on all sides. You've been a radio station engineer, you have been a salesperson, you have been a manufacturer's rep, and you're an SBE chairman, if I remember you telling me.
effective tomorrow. Yes.
So what do you see as being the way to improve the situation?
Well, I think that everybody's gotten all geeked out about the technology and have taken what was originally the tip of a spear and turned it into a blunt instrument. And, back in, I'll admit my age, in the 70s during EBS existed because the Ruskies were going to nuke us into oblivion. And it had one reason for existing, and that was it. Today, there's just too much stuff. And the FCC and FEMA really need to get together and work with the general public and really determine, what does the public want? And then radio needs broadcast, the broadcast industry needs to carry that.
Suppose that would require a new EAS box.
Not necessarily. You could probably,
suppose it did.
well, okay, so it does. I mean, we're just going to have to deal with that.
Every station's got to pay $2,000 to $3,000 for each station.
If we're trimming it down so that we've got a box that does very few things, you know, but also part of the problem is that I don't think that you can rely on the internet to provide the ongoing information required, because, you know, the internet's going to go out. The internet is not impervious. So what are we going to do to you know, there are just a lot of questions that we need to sit down and answer. And I think a lot of people, especially at the government level, and I'm sorry to bash on government people, but I think a lot of assumptions have been made without really adequate consideration to the reality of just how strong that is. You know, well, we'll just call them on the cell phone. Well, cell phones are out. You know, people don't realize, outside of this group, people do not realize just how far a cell phone call goes to get across the street. You know, if I'm going to call my wife, we're both on the same carrier, we're both on the same cell phone tower, but the cell phone is going from Everett, Washington to Kansas City, Missouri, and coming back to Everett, Washington. You know, there's a lot of points of failure in the way there. So what do we do? How do we correct that? How do we patch that up so it's actually a workable situation? I don't have those answers, and I apologize.
Well, that is indeed the problem. Radio engineers are being tasked to solve this without the right tools.
Without any tools.
Or without the authority.
Yeah.
You know, or without the instructions. Go to the FCC website and look for that Part 11 rewrite.
Yeah, it's right up there with ham radio type acceptance, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, the closest thing that I've had to a, you know, an alert radio was the weather radio that allowed you to program your counties and what types
Actually, if you put an upside down rack shelf somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem with those radios is, in my area, the weather transmitter is like 40 miles away. And the only one that actually works is the one with an outdoor antenna. But in the middle of the night, if you have the alerts on, it'll wake you up but quick. But I had, you know, we occasionally have some flooding. So I had flood programmed, and, you know, a brook 40 miles away was overflowing in the middle of the night. So I got the warning.
Well, now you get to the training and misuse, where there's a sheriff in Kansas, was it, that sent out an EAS message about a lost cat in the middle of the night?
Well, I have a cat, so that would be important to me.
Yes.
And didn't we have an alert from, I think it was Hawaii, that said missiles were launching or something?
Yes.
Sure did.
Maybe that's why they didn't alert anybody when the fires. They were too afraid they'd be in trouble for that too.
Well, as I understood it, those sirens were intended only for tsunamis.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
You know,
Lack of training.
But
Lack of-
I think that the legitimate concern that it might have driven people into the fire.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. And you could give that guy at least half a credit, just like you could give the electric company half a credit when they said, yes, the fire was put out, we thought, but the firemen left before they made sure. So who's at fault?
Unfortunately, a lot of these alerting systems are very reactive and not proactive. And I don't know what the solution is to make systems proactive because they can't foresee problems.
They'll get to it. They'll get to it sometime. They had to change the meaning of NPT first. That was so important.
In the early days of EAS, one of the problems we had with the Weather Service in LA was that they had organized their warning service to give multiple warnings. So we were getting, tornado watches or warnings every 20 minutes. And you lose a lot of program.
Yeah.
And-
I mentioned we got a severe storm warning every 10 minutes for an hour here.
Yeah, and the other problem I personally had is one night during prime time when we were watching something on cable, we got an EAS alert for a flood in Needles. Well, I live in a neighborhood of LA, and Needles is 3 mountain ranges away. And they had the audio locked off the channel for, a good minute and a half. And there was nothing we could do about it. So the other thing we learned, and this is a reality we have to live with, is that originating EASs is not the easiest thing. And in LA, we tasked that to the sheriff's emergency operation room. And the problem was they rotate the guys that are in that room so that you've got a new person in there every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's a new person that has to be trained on how to enter stuff into the system. So, and I think that's a big stumbling block.
Is it, or is the problem that broadcasters put their boxes in automatic and forget about the whole concept of public service? Now, Rich.
Well, ours were an automatic, but we've got stations across the state of Nebraska that are just transmitter sites. I mean, they're all programmed out of Omaha. So we're not out there where the weather's happening, but I do have my boxes set for what I call mission critical things such as tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, blizzard warnings. I don't do severe thunderstorm warnings because they just go off like a machine gun all the time, and you do lose a lot of program.
Okay, Mark, I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Pick one of your sites that's 80 miles from you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a tornado alert
Mm-hmm.
for Johnson County.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea where Johnson County is, whether it's in front of me or behind me, whether it's to my left or my right. Will your station ever tell me that that tornado is 50 miles north of Omaha?
Sure it would. It's whatever the Weather Service programs it.
No, they're going to program it as Johnson County.
No, but they do indicate, at least ours have been indicating how many miles from certain locations this has been detected. Maybe other parts of the country don't do that, but they do here.
Okay, well, let's hear from someone else then. Do you get specific information, or as I have seen on the crawl here and the audio, this is an alert for Pinal, Pima, Cochise, Santa Rosa County, and then maybe after a minute or so, they might say that there's a storm warning. People who get a telephone call and it's a robocall, what do? What would you do if you heard a string of counties? Are you going to stay with it, or are you going to tune somewhere else?
So this would be a robo alert.
Well, it would seem that way, wouldn't it?
Sarasota County sends them out.
They do have it now, and I was programming a new Sage box for one of our new stations, and they do have it so that you can actually parse out what part of the county, for example, you want to be covered.
Yes,
So if it's western and central Custer County in Nebraska, those are the only people that are going to get that.
Yes, partial county alerting, and we have it here in southern Arizona as well. But
Okay.
I have no clue where Custer County is.
Mhm.
Now I know with the DASTEC you can postpend a voice cut to any EAS alert and say this alert came to you from KXXX Omaha. At least give you some indication or thereabouts. How is it up there where you are, Brian?
I have no idea,
Okay.
to be honest. I mean, up here in the Pacific Northwest, EAS gets used so rarely
Mm-hmm.
that it basically doesn't even exist. If somebody were to hear an actual activation go off, they would probably just stare at their radio dumbfounded and wonder what in the hell this noise is.
Yeah.
And someday we're going to have an earthquake that is going to require EAS and nobody's going to know what to do. And fortunately, I am married to one of the greatest emergency activation people on the planet, and my wife will know what to do. And I'll just follow her instructions.
That works.
Yeah,
Yes.
but don't you normally follow her instructions?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now we know.
I like sleeping inside the house at night.
Barry, if you happen to get that alert for Wichita, Kansas, that's in Sedgwick County, just so you know.
Very good.
I'll write that down somewhere.
Well, you know, that earthquake in the Pacific Northwest is going to be a whopper.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, from what I understand, it's not the area is not equipped to handle it.
No, not even.
Yeah, and it will basically be the same sort of thing. They're trying to get people away from the coast because the earthquake will just, turn the soil to quicksand.
Jello is what, it's called liquefaction.
Yes.
Definitely around Astoria, Oregon, that's all sand. And it'll just turn to Jello.
Yeah.
Wiggle everywhere.
And then tsunamis to boot.
Yes. Where I live near Everett, Washington, I live out on Whidbey Island, and it is literally a gravel bar. I mean, I live on a pile of round gravel. We're going to be surfing to Olympia. And hopefully I'll be able to reach out and grab, one of Cairo's towers and hold on as we go by Vashon Island. But it's going to be crazy, especially if we get subduction zone, EAS is going to be worthless.
Mark, you had a hurricane come through your backyard on its way to Houston last week, didn't you? Or a tropical storm? Mark? Because I know we got a little bit of the wind here. We didn't get much water. But it came across the Gulf and went up Corpus Christi and through Houston, if I remember correctly.
And what happened with the tornado that came up the West Coast?
That was a hurricane, and
A hurricane. Yeah.
Mr. Sensenbach, you could talk to that one. We were just outside of that. We didn't get anything at all here in Tucson. I think Yuma's about as far east as it went.
Well, I bought oceanfront property in Nevada, just in case.
Were you going to move your bridge from Brooklyn to that?
I can do that remotely. Several of the bridges are in the Nevada area anyway.
I was gonna say, where did London Bridge end up now?
Yes.
Lake Havasu City.
Yeah. And the Queen donated those to me before she died.
The problem we had in LA was that a lot of the broadcasters, went all out in warning people about this tropical cyclone that was headed our direction. And the reality was that in LA, the ocean is cold. And cold water is not a friend of hurricanes or tropical cyclones or anything. So the reality is that most of us just got a lot of light rain for a 24-hour period. And we enjoyed the rain, but where I live in Glendale, we never really got any wind. And
Jim,
supposedly the eye went right over downtown LA.
Jim, would you agree that one of the big problems is our industry overhypes these events?
That's a whole different thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, the storm of the century happens like every 2 years here. So, and 100 years is a long time.
I was under the impression that warm seawater does more to encourage hurricanes than cold. And when I was in California.
That's exactly right. The warm and the seawater down near the tip of Baja is still warm. It's the same thing that keeps the temperature in Hawaii at 70 degrees all year long. But once it crossed the border, it started to die down. So it was, by the time it really got to the population areas, it was just, a tropical. I forget the term they use.
Depression.
Yeah, tropical depression.
That was that's the interesting thing about Superstorm Sandy on how those came together. When you think in late October, you don't really think of storms of that magnitude in the New York area, because you have the what they call the Labrador currents coming down, which are relatively cold water. But what happens is when the hurricanes come up, and also what was happening on the West Coast in this case too, is that warm water from the tip of the Baja since it was spinning, it was also warming up that what would normally be cold water over in LA. It's the same situation as what you had with Superstorm Sandy when you had that storm come up in that affected the Labrador Current temperatures, and that's how you got the 80-degree water in the end of October in New York. In New York. So it really had to do with the mixing of the water.
Yeah, I recall I had moved out by that time, but my apartment was on the Hudson River, and the first floor of the apartment building was underwater. So had I still lived there, I would have been trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed I have friends in the Palm Springs area, and they were pretty badly flooded. And as I recall, that's pretty far inland.
Well, that's similar to what we had happened yesterday. A lot of the rain that we got yesterday really was a feeder band that had picked up water from the Gulf and dropped it here. And if you watch that northeast, essentially a northeast line for that feeder band, that's essentially what you were looking at over there with all of that rain and the flooding.
Yeah, I've got a friend in Fort Myers, and he said they just got some light rain.
Right.
That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Because it made that slight turn to the west at about 11. I would say probably about 11 o'clock on Tuesday, and that was enough to shift it away to where we didn't get that. You know, we just got the once the storm went through, that's when the flooding started to became a nuisance, I guess you could say.
How much rain did you get, Jeff?
I don't know what the official totals are. It was we got a few feet down here in Sarasota. Pinellas County is a little bit further. Is of course a little bit further up north. They were also flooded, but they're lower lying anyway. But what makes that bad too, and this is where the hype comes in, is that's the most densely populated county in the state, and it's not that large of a county, and there's not a whole lot of ways in which to get in and out of it. So when you run into those types of that in that low lying, and then you run into the storm surge, that's where you can, that's where that's when it gets serious. So. But yeah, it was somewhere, I would say probably about 3 or 4 feet above normal. Maybe it was a little bit more in some areas. So
there was one bend that apparently had not had a hurricane or any kind of severe weather in decades.
Yeah, they have. In fact, I think that's what made that bend to begin with, was all the hurricanes that were going in there. I don't, but as far as with Perry, that may be what they're talking about there. But I've seen all kinds of storms go, that, and they normally do start in the Western Gulf, and they make their way up because they're making their turn, to go northeast by that time, and that's where that when you get into the gravitational pull. It starts speeding up, and then of course it goes faster than the 1,000 miles an hour that we normally travel. So, and it starts heading north at that point, and it picks up speed. That's really a characteristic of the hurricanes.
Well, basically, the Earth is not a safe place to live.
Well, that's why we're looking at the moon.
And it's not flat either.
Really?
Last I checked.
Now, there's a movie out that could prove the point that the Earth is flat and you'll fall off the side. It's called The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yep.
If
Remember
you
that.
haven't seen this movie, you have to see that and its sequel.
Yep.
But definitely see the original movie.
Well, if the Earth was flat, the cats would have knocked us all off the edge by now anyway. So
Yes, that's very true.
Well, the Earth is mostly made of water and it's not carbonated, so it must be flat.
Yes.
there you go.
Mike Shane comments putting Ambers on EAS has been a bad idea because of incompetence. I think everybody has received an Amber Alert where the event is anywhere from 200 to 400 miles away.
Or
Yeah.
they don't give enough information.
The one I remember very clearly was a Sunday morning at about 11:40, sitting in a congregation, and my ears detected dozens of phones going off, and there was an Amber Alert that was basically that some child was missing at about 2:10 in the morning, and it was being broadcast at 11:50 a.m. 5 minutes later was the cancellation from 2:30 a.m. that the cell phone companies had managed to delay for 10 hours. That really helped a lot of people.
Well,
The worst I've seen was we had a flood watch in the middle of the night for Georgia, and woke everybody up about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was fit to be tied. There were a lot of people. They were about ready to run the emergency people out of town at that point. So.
One of the fun things about this is it's usually statewide when they send things like that. And where I am in Texas, I'm actually closer to Atlanta, Georgia than I am El Paso. Go figure.
well, you know, that's funny. I moved from Boston to Dallas, and I was working for TM in Dallas. And the first weekend, I said, I think I'll just drive to El Paso and visit one of our affiliates. And the whole room just burst out laughing. I had no idea. Coming from New England, you know, you could be 3 states away in a couple of hours. But Texas wasn't quite that close.
Atlanta, Georgia is 4 states away.
Yeah,
You worked for Tom Merriman?
I did. Yep.
Wow.
Jim Long. Yep. I worked for them for 3 years.
What year was this? Or 3 years was this?
Oh, let's see. Probably would have been 74 to 78.
Oh, was KMGC still part of it? They had
Yes.
a radio station over there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
1029. It used to be the Elkins Institute.
Well, it was also, as far as I remember, religious. And
Right.
it changed format. And, you know, we have another WKRP kind of thing. But yeah, the studios were in our building.
Yep. You know John Adcock?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay.
name.
Yeah, he was engineer for 30 years at that station. Before him, it was Charles Staples.
I didn't deal with the radio station at all. I was in programming and production.
So you know Bob Bruton.
Yes, the name is familiar, but that was so long ago that lots of things have escaped.
Small world in a big city.
Yeah, and a lot of the people who were working for us had come over from Jam. Let's see, I think Jerry Ashley was one.
I knew Jerry, not well, but I knew him.
Yeah. Otis Connor wrote an awful lot of our jingles
Yeah.
and
Well,
commercials.
Bruton went back to Pam's when he left for a while.
Mhm.
You know Don Everhart at Pam's, I guess.
Oh, I never worked for Pam's.
Oh, okay.
I do remember the people from Pam's who came to TM.
Yeah, that religious group was Berean Fellowship International, as I recall.
I don't separate most religions. So
I didn't either. Their transmitter was next to mine out at Cedar Hill, and they had signs everywhere. Don't touch, God's watching.
Yeah. Well, probably they'd be still broadcasting Brother Stare.
I ended up buying that tower. That was the old Channel 33 tower when I was with Susquehanna, because 33 moved over to 39. And your station, FM, was diplexed with KVIL. A guy named Chuck Crosno and Charlie Shoemaker built the diplexing system for that. It's a long time ago.
Yep. It was a very interesting market. I think we kept the Dallas Symphony from disappearing because we hired many of their players, for jingles.
I think that station got bought out by Disney, and Roy Disney was like the president, and gosh, it's all coming back.
Yeah, I was there when Roy bought TM, and they gave us stock, which none of us thought was worth anything until Roy Disney bought it, and suddenly our stock was worth something. And then, unfortunately, by the time Roy took it over, almost all key personnel had gone. They took their money, and Ernie Wynn, who was the GM of programming, bought a station in, where was it? Ann Arbor, Michigan. So people Jim Long left, started another company, and I think Tom Merriman stayed.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool that the president of the radio division of Disney